Hello all, welcome to another edition of the fabulous Founders Collective. Today we have an amazing guest on the show, goes with the name of Jonathan Chippindale.
Hi, and thank you so much for, thank you for having me on. I think it's the accepted way of starting these things. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
In the sweltering heat.
It's crazy, right? Honestly. The brain cells are completely just squished at this point.
Yeah, mine are being compressed.
So today I'd like to kick right into it, if that's okay. So the viewers and I would love to know a bit more about how you kind of started your journey all the way over to having this wonderful technologically advanced innovation organization called Holition. So if you could give us a whistle-stop tour of your journey so far, and not forgetting the cheesy kind of self-discovery pit stop, so to speak, at college and maybe university, will be great.
Well, I mean, cheese is very much what we do, or what I do. Actually, I was asked a very similar question a couple of weeks ago in Glasgow because we had a meeting. I'm an advisor at the British School of Fashion, which is basically Glasgow Caledonian University. It's got a campus in Glasgow, campus in London, campus in New York, campus in other places. And there was a sort of student sort of session, and everybody on the panel, and there's some really important people there, like, you know, the photographer Rankin and Jane Shepperson, used to be managing director of Topshop back in the Philip Green days, and CEO of Whistles. And then for some reason I sort of stumbled onto it, but I kind of do the tech stuff. But the question was very similar, like, how did you get into this, and how should students who are interested in luxury and fashion sort of make a start in the industry? And all of my illustrious kind of co-advisors all had basically got their elbows out and, you know, stalked people in luxury brands and sort of deliberately met them at coffee shops and said hi. And there was a real kind of strategy there. And I felt really embarrassed to say that actually my own journey has been kind of one of meandering and serendipity, I guess. And so I when I was at university, I for some reason, I was absolutely fixated on flying. So my first kind of career was in aviation and flying.
Oh,
and
really
I
cool.
had a sort of commission with the Air Force. And then after a while of flying, I thought, okay, I've done that. You know, we're all kind of quite arrogant at university. I was a lot more arrogant than I am now. And also I was studying philosophy and kind of military service aren't necessarily
so very different to what
completely different. And I sort of realized that actually there was an element of creativity that I was really missing, and an element of strategy, and an element of kind of intellectualism and just kind of thinking, really. And that free thinking wasn't really encouraged in the services. So it was time to go off and do something else. But I had no idea what I wanted to do, because I hadn't really considered that I would need to do anything. I kind of assumed I would do that.
At what part were you like, oh, I want to do something else now? After how long?
Yeah, probably during university. So yeah, sort of university. Yeah, I mean, university was great. I mean, it is great. I can't say I did enough work. I was never a particularly good student. I think I always had a brain, but I sort of lacked that application. And you know, there was sort of far more to interest me in the university union than perhaps in the lectures. And I was the same at school. I kind of not drifted through, but I did the bare minimum, which, by the way, dear listeners, I would urge you not to follow my example. And yeah, I've got a couple of kids of my own, and I can see the warning signs, and let's hope they take after their mother, not their father. But so then I was ended up with, like, being back in London, not having a clue what I wanted to do. And I kind of felt, again, meandering and procrastinating and putting off the inevitable. I thought, well, let's kind of, bizarrely, I thought, well, let's become a cycle courier. So I had a bicycle. My parents had a flat in Harley Street behind John Lewis. And so I just started cycling around London, delivering messages with the view to getting fit, enjoying the sunshine, having a bit of cash, and just kind of getting some airtime just to think about what I wanted to do. And typical Jonathan, that just went on for a couple of months. And I should have stopped it, but I didn't. I carried on going, and then it started raining, and the weather became near Christmas,
then you got
and
put
it was
off,
cold,
I
and I thought, I need to do something else, but I'm still not ready to look at a career. So I became a Brook Street girl, and I was temping around offices, and I ended up in a storeroom, working in the storeroom in a jewellery, silver and porcelain brand called Mappin' a Web in Regent Street.
Oh, I've heard of it.
And that was meant to be a kind of 2-week gig, and 6 months later I was kind of still there, which is kind of, you know, again, I'm thinking I really need to do something. But working in the stockroom, the advertising teams would come down and borrow stuff for shoots and catalogs, and I got friendly with them, and they said, did I want to go work for them, which I did. So I then joined as a kind of junior in the advertising department, and then became, over the course of 9 years, became head of marketing for Mappin and Webb, and then when Mappin and Webb were bought by Garrard, the Crown Jewellers, then went into them. I was head of marketing for there, and then when it was bought by Asprey, I became senior marketing director for the group, and then international marketing director, and then so that was kind of 9 years later, and then I got headhunted by a company called De Beers, which was a large South African mining company. And in those days, De Beers had 50% of the world's diamonds were mined by them,
right?
And 80%. And so other mines decided it was very useful to sell their diamonds through De Beers. So De Beers had 80% of the rough diamond market, and every 5 weeks, all of those stones would come through our offices in London. And I was on the marketing side, so I was, building out products like engagement rings, pushing a diamond is forever, thinking about anniversary bands, birth of a child. Yeah. And I was working on the market. So how do we take diamonds into a brand new market that doesn't have diamond or doesn't purchase diamonds, like India? How can we turn a gold culture into a diamond culture? Right. I did the same for the Gulf, and started to work in China. And at that, and towards the end of my De Beers career, which was about another 10 years, I was living in Dubai. And then I had my first child. Yeah. And I kind of thought, really? Do I really want to sit in an office until 10 or 11 o'clock at night? Because the time difference.
Oh, of course,
11 o'clock was kind of 6 o'clock back in London, and my boss was always calling me late on a Friday night. And Friday was my weekend, by the way. And I just thought, I've just had enough of this. If I'm going to have kids, I want to see them and see my wife and actually kind of have a bit of me. And, there's a startup in all of us, I think. Yeah. And, I was kind of in my mid-30s, and I felt, why not? And I had 6 months garden leave, so I could resign and then get my family back to the UK and then think about what I wanted to do. And I guess marketing, what is marketing at its base? It's kind of understanding human behavior. And, I was a strategic marketing director, so that was like thinking about large demographic shifts in human behavior, and particularly interesting if you can identify consumer-based shifts that brands aren't aware of or don't recognize or don't believe in. And it sounds really bizarre to even say this, but like 16 years ago, that was digital, right? So, no one really understood the thing about digital. It was completely new. And I just thought it was interesting. So really, Holition started as a way of exploring what kind of tools would luxury need, technology or digital tools would luxury need to have created for them, so that they could talk to this new emerging consumer group that they didn't really believe in. A luxury industry that was all about the weight of the Rolex watch or the stitcher in the Birkin bag.
That's the first thing you would think of back then, right?
Yeah, and just saw digital as way too impersonal a channel to talk about, to communicate anything that luxury held dear to its heart, like service and history and craftsmanship and product and, all of those kind of important, and the thickness of the carpet, and the sound and the architecture of the store and the way the sales teams greeted customers. And digital was not going to communicate that. So it's much better that we ignore it altogether. And we just saw interest and opportunity in that. So that's kind of where all that started. And then, and again, in a world where some brands had websites, but most didn't. And those websites were really only about the location of the store and the opening hours. So that's kind of where we thought, I guess it was more about just us understanding the direction of travel, not necessarily turning it into a studio or anything. It was, early days we were quite naive and we weren't quite sure what was going to happen. So we just wanted to be part of it.
That makes sense. And I think marketing nowadays is all about building that connection with the consumer, isn't it? How can you emotionally attach a new consumer, or even a loyal one, and continue that journey for them with a brand, whether it's luxury, whether it's, not. So great points, and really nice to see how you started off in the stockroom cupboard.
Oh yeah, very important, stockroom cupboard. Well, and I say that, I say it because it's true, but I remember also being on a panel a few years ago with Tom Ford, and Tom Ford was asked a question by one of the audience, which is, basically similar, like, have you got any advice to people who, to somebody who wants to get into the fashion industry, or a mere designer? And he was very clear. It was like, learn to draw, learn to cut cloth, learn how to sew and learn how to stitch, because he was getting sort of, I guess, fed up is my phrase, not his, but fed up with people that were sort of doing great things on computers, but never actually had contact with items of fashion. And that really plays to me and to the way that Holition operates, which is, we are a profoundly technology agency, which is not to say that we are against technology. Everything that we do uses technology, but as a studio, we're profoundly pro-human. And I think that humanity, that kind of importance of analog, is something that a lot of digital sort of natives miss, I think. And that's what Tom Ford was saying. So I think it's, isn't it? I mean, quite a lot of the people that work for me, they're sort of younger generations, and they have, definite expectations. But it can't be bad to start at the bottom. It can't be bad to sweep up. I make coffee for my kids. And I'm very happy to wash up at the end of the studio day. And that's fine, right? I don't believe in assumed power. I've got no interest in job titles. It's what can you do?
Yeah,
how much value can you bring? And and what about what can you bring to the Holition family? Which is not just about being great at your job, but a great colleague.
Yeah, and I feel like every human being on that sort of level, level, has their own unique kind of spark or something they bring to the table. So it's all about finding that, isn't it? It's not about the marketing emails and what captions can you write for Instagram. It's like, what can you bring as part of your personality? Because everyone has something. It's just about finding it. So whether you find it from a stockroom, cupboard or wherever you start in life.
And that's so important for us because, when I say us, in terms of Holition's culture, because one of the things I found fascinating about like the unraveling of the Holition journey is that I had it beaten into me by older and wiser kind of marketing dudes and dudettes that actually it was all about strategy. So we would think very carefully before making a footstep forward. We'd absolutely be certain that it was a small step but in the right direction, and luxury was a kind of a series of these very well considered small steps. So slow moving and sluggish, but forward, but always in the right direction. When I started a studio, it was carnage and chaos from day one, and that's not changed. So having to accept like revolution is an uncertainty and chaos is very much part of the journey of my early learnings, and recognizing that I don't have control of anything. It's the people around me, the clients, the environment, all of these kind of external forces are sort of pulling me in different ways. So that was important. And just to your point, one of the ways that sort of extrapolated itself was in the way we hired staff. So we were never funded. We've always worked from cash flow. So I've never had the luxury of sitting down with a blank sheet of paper and thinking, what is the ideal structure of the agency? What roles do we need? And therefore, let's go and find those people. We've kind of acquired friends and colleagues kind of in a very organic way. I'll give you a couple of examples. And by the way, I think we can teach people most things, but what we can't teach is attitude. I agree with this. We can't teach attitude.
Yes, 100,000%. Your outlook on life can't be taught to you, but other technical, whether it is things associated with your job, attributes can. So I totally agree with you.
No, absolutely. And so, there was a girl, Gintari from Lithuania, who was studying up at Glasgow. She's doing politics and not enjoying her degree, but wanted to be a filmmaker and was following us on Instagram. One afternoon, she just bought a ticket to London.
Casually.
And knocked on our door. And said, I'm Gintari, I want to work for you. I've come down from Glasgow, I'm going to work for you. And actually, I said no. Because I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared for her to give up her degree.
Right.
Like, that's really important. That's a big decision to make. But what we said is, every holiday you can come down and you can work freelance for us. And after your degree, there's a job here for you. And she then came and joined us. So that's kind of what happened. And then there's another one, Adriana, who was working for studying at Cordwainers, part of the London College of Fashion. and I think she heard me speak. And the next morning, we were doing a project in China, so we were getting into the office about 7 o'clock because of the time difference.
Yeah.
And I walked into the office, and all the lights were off except one, and there was a stranger there. It was Adriana. I didn't know who she was. I assumed she's one of the interns. And what she'd done is she'd had a chat to the kind of security guard at the very bottom of the building and said, "Hey, I'm from Holition. I've lost my key. Can you let me in?"
Oh gosh.
And as the day went on, everybody assumed that she was working for someone else. And it turned out that no, she'd said, I'm working for Holition. I'm not leaving. You're going to give me a job. You don't have to pay me, but I will prove to you that I've got the value. And there's a kind of Adriana-shaped hole in the wall where she just literally charged in. And you've got to give people those jobs to those people, right? Because they'll do anything for you, and that's what you want, right? You want commitment.
Yes.
You just want commitment.
Commitment is key, I think.
Commitment to not, and by the way, it's not commitment to me; it's commitment to each other.
Yeah, and to herself, I think.
And to herself, yeah. I mean, the culture at Holition is, no one owes me, Jonathan, anything, but they will not let each other down. They would not dream of walking into the office having quit early or whatever. They would never ever let each other down, and that's kind of really priceless.
That is, I think it's all about that team spirit, isn't it? And it's not just the 9 to 5. And key projects, you said you've worked on global projects around the world. I think stuff like that really brings people together. You see each other in different climates and, like you're saying, working around the clock at different time zones. Yeah. That must really bring a sense of just closeness to the team, almost like a family.
Yeah. I mean, we're a small studio, right? So we can't compete with, the Googles and the Facebooks. and I lost one software engineer to Facebook, but they paid her 3 times what I could pay. It wasn't actually, it was Snap, and it was 3 times what I paid. And they gave her a personalized coffee mug, and I can't match that, that kind of thing. But normally, no, we get people stay with us for a very long time, 12 years, 13 years. I've got people who were with me at the beginning who are still with me, and part of that is, to your point, when you work, if you're a software developer, and obviously we are many things other than software developers, but the software developers at Google, they'll work in a very tight way on a tiny piece of code. Whereas what we can do is say, here's a project for Louis Vuitton, or here's an art piece that's going into the Guggenheim in Bilbao. You'll work on that from start to finish, and we'll put you on a plane to help install it over in the Guggenheim, and you'll step back and think, I did that. Not I and 100 other engineers. Yes. I did it. And by the way, I did it with that filmmaker, that artist, that data scientist, that anthropologist, and that mathematician. And we, as Holition, did that. And that's my bit in it. And I think that's a very good, that's something that you don't get in many jobs. I didn't get that in my luxury career because there was a lot of other people involved, and there was a hierarchy.
Okay.
So, I might have been making recommendations, but other people were making decisions. But again, one of the reasons why I started Holition was that I had to recognize that I was actually not a very good manager. And therefore, we're very flat and non-hierarchical, and there's a lot of delegation and a lot of, I hate that word, empowerment, but a lot of decision-making empowerment. So, I've had to learn in my career that not to get precious about directions. Water runs downhill in several different ways. As long as it gets to the bottom, then that's fine. So if one of my team has an idea, and as long as it's strategically and directionally in the right area, if it's not the way that I would have done it, I'm fine with that. Yeah. As long as it achieves the outcome, I'm absolutely fine with that. And that means that, some of the people that work for me, they can be 20, 21, and they can be actively contributing from day one.
Wow. See, I feel like this kind of leadership where you allow, so to speak, for decision making, whether you're kind of an exec, whether you're a senior, whatever your job title might be, I think that's what allows for more honesty in the workplace. And then that also builds a very secure and safe environment. And then I feel like that then allows for even more creativity to flow naturally, right? So, that's a really good point.
Well, I mean, I guess as I've got older, I've had to, first of all, I've become a lot more confident in me, right? So I'm not having to
you've had years of experience.
I've got years of experience, and, I had to get my elbows out and fight at the beginning, and then you fight a little bit less, and you move a bit higher, and and you start thinking, all right, well, who am I trying to impress anymore? I'm okay with who I am now, and so I think that. So, but then one of the things. So as a result of that, I think what's interesting when I think about the boys and girls that work for me is, actually it's not my world anymore. It's theirs. It's theirs, right? It's the world of millennials, the world of Gen Z, and the generations coming up behind there, and again, I'm completely comfortable with that. But what it means is that there are new ideas. Holition's all about ideas, but there are new ideas out there, and bold ideas, and shifting ideas. So I kind of feel that my role at Holition, as the kind of old guy there, is I've got the experience, so I've got the kind of steady hand on the tiller, just making sure that the boat's kind of nosing off in the right direction. Yeah. But actually, it's my team. I may have the experience, but they've got the relevance.
So they're like steering the boat almost, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So and as a result, I'm still learning, right? And one thing I say to all of the guys and girls that work for me is, I Jonathan always sit down on Christmas Eve with a large glass of wine, and I think, have I learned something? And if I haven't learned something, even in my advanced years, then I'm going to walk away. I'm not. This is not the right place for me. You've got to sit back at every year and go, have I made progress? Have I forwarded? Have I learned something? Am I a better person? And if you're not, you're in the wrong place. Just run away.
It's interesting you say that, because I read a quote. I'm very much into quotes. About a week ago, and it said something of the sort around you should really look into your close circle of friends and look around and see if you're still learning from others. And if you feel like you aren't, you need to expand your circle.
Yeah, ditch your friends.
Yes, ditch your friends and go get some new ones.
Get a whole load of new ones in. Ship a bunch of new ones in.
So it just reminds me of that quote, what you're mentioning with learning.
So when I was at De Beers, I actually resigned 3 times. And the first time I resigned, my boss said, was absolutely convinced that actually I was running for all the wrong reasons. I wasn't resigning from De Beers. I just didn't like Dubai, and I lived there for a number of years, and I'd had enough of it. And he was absolutely right. He was absolutely right. What a great boss. And he said, look, jump on a plane, come back to London, have a chat with his headhunter, and then go back to Dubai. So I had kind of like a day trip to London. And that guy, I mean, I can't stand headhunters. Sorry for any out here listening. There was estate agents and people that cold call and ring.
I'm sure a lot of people agree with you.
But actually, this one was quite smart. And one of the things he said was, which actually we talk about sometimes in the studio, which is like really understand what muscles in your brain you enjoy using, and be absolutely brutal about it and honest with yourself. And I think what he means is what skills are important to you. And then every time you get an opportunity in life, just measure it against those skills or those needs. And he was so right, because what I realized is I really enjoyed the creativity of my job, the marketing and the building.
Yeah.
But I recognized that I was missing. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I really enjoyed the strategy of what I was doing, but I wasn't getting enough creativity, because the creativity was going to the agency. So my role was to assess the creativity against the strategy, but not get creative. And I really was itching to roll my sleeves up and get stuck in. But the higher up the ladder I got, the less I was becoming a doer. More I was managing. And I also realized that I didn't enjoy managing people. So that was, again, I think that those are really good, because I do meet people that aren't happy in their jobs. And when you start talking to them about that, it's clear that actually their motivations are completely different to the reality of what they're doing and the value that they're getting from it. And I guess that's that point about, we've sometimes made decisions to move places because of money. That goes back to Holition, right? Because we aren't able to pay top dollar, but we're giving them something else that is perhaps more valuable. And if you move somewhere that pays more, for the first few weeks, you'll get out of bed going, brilliant. You'll get that first salary check and it's like, fantastic.
Yeah.
But then after that, it's diminishing returns. It's like, God, I'm really not enjoying this. I can't leave. I can't leave because the salary is really good.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you're not earning so much, but you're really enjoying your job, then you're bouncing out of bed to get stuck in at that work. And yeah, the salary is a pain, but you're getting so much out of the work space that actually it kind of compensates. And I think that's kind of what he was saying. But be honest, you've just got to have that honesty.
And it's having the feelings that you can't buy, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's you being able to do more creative things, if you're into creative things, whether it's working for an organization that gives back to charity or whatever it is, It's just those feelings that you can't really buy. So I agree. I have a lot of friends and people in the industry that have had to make several career changes just because they feel like a year in, the money's great, but they don't feel fulfilled.
Well, the money becomes a kind of a sort of handcuff at that point.
Yeah.
Because the money's so good, you get used to that spending, and
yes,
actually you can't go backwards.
Your lifestyle changes, doesn't it?
And you can't go backwards into something that's a bit cooler and a bit more interesting.
Yeah.
That's when you start your own business, right? That's when you start.
The point.
That's that trip.
If everyone's listening to that.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I had a random question for you. Do you, Jonathan, have any pet peeves? And if so, what are they?
A pet peeve?
Anything that gives you the ick?
Well, we're talking. From a
This
professional
could be
point of view, it
could be professionally and could be personally.
I mean, I just going back to what we were saying before. If people aren't giving 100%, then that really that's a peeve. That's a massive peeve. Again, fortunately, it doesn't happen. There've been maybe one or two instances over the last 15 years where we've had people that have like, I'm sorry, but it's 5:30, I'm off. I don't care if you lot are waiting, you lot are working, or we've got a deadline, I'm off. But those people don't last very long because they get kind of defenestrated quite fast.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got too many peeves. I mean, I've become a lot more sort of relaxed. Maybe it's because about 3 or 4 years ago, I started running a lot, and they say that, and I wasn't a great exerciser before, and they say that exercise is very good for stress relief.
Flowing.
Yeah, so I'm a lot less stressed than I was, but yeah, I mean that's the one that's gonna get me wide awake at 3 a.m. going, now what are my peeves? I don't know, what are yours?
Oh, this is very random. I think the first thing that comes to mind, I have to say it, if I'm at a dinner table, this is so weird, but if I'm having dinner with people, whether it's professionally, whether it's people that I know, whatever it is, luckily it's not anyone in my close circle, and they chew their food with their mouth open.
Oh, really?
I will, if you're my friend and you're watching this, or if you know me, I will immediately leave my food.
I didn't know that.
Even if I'm hungry.
I didn't even know that you could chew with your mouth open.
But when you can see someone
that's not nice at all. That's horrible.
That's like the first thing, and I've experienced that twice in my life. I don't really want to experience it ever again. That's
horrible.
Oh gosh.
I guess I'd probably just go, oh, that's a sort of Gen Z thing. Because we often, there's quite a lot of when we were our studios. It's expanded and expanded every time. A sort of office just opposite ours has become free. We've taken that and knocked the wall down, so we've expanded bit by bit. But in the early days, our kind of creative breakout area was the pub round the corner. So that's still we used to have our shareholder meetings there, and
awesome.
So there was always a kind of bunch of people down there, and so there's quite a lot of.
Was it a creative session with some beers? Or
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, because I guess going back to that thing about serendipity and creativity, one of the things. Look, very lucky to have met, a number of people. Let me rephrase that. I'm very lucky to have met a very small number of people who are truly inspirational. And by truly inspirational, there's something different about those people. There's a kind of crackle of sulfur or a bit of ginger. There's something different about them. I don't know. It's something primordial, which I guess is, I don't know, whether it's about, sort of primordial attraction or alpha people or whatever it is, and but there's something different about them. So we're very fortunate early on to have. We did a project for Elon Musk at one point. We worked with Alexander McQueen, although and he was clearly a total genius. The sadness was that he didn't sort of recognize it, but there are very few of those genuine people. Most of us mere mortals, we have to get by borrowing and recasting other people's ideas, and we're a big fan of that sort of serendipitous moment where two people will come together and between them come up with a third idea that they wouldn't have had individually. So finding I used to think in the early days that my job was blurring the lines between the development team, the software engineers and the hardware specialists and the data scientists and the creative team who are all filmmakers and artists and animators and designers, and the strategy and UX team who are all anthropologists and psychologists, and
That's very cool.
and try and blur those around so that we can create a kind of space where people can kind of co-create. That was then. Now it happens more organically because 15 years ago software developers were very techie, but actually
that's how they're seen as, aren't they?
That's how they were. I mean, they are. I'm sure there are now, but the software engineers, some of them have got fantastic Instagram feeds. Many are into photography, or some of quite a lot of all the creatives now obviously use technology, and some of them are coding to create sound works in art, and that sort of space is much easier. But in the old days it was, how do we get people together? Pub. Very easy way to get people together. We used to have
absolutely,
first Thursday in every month was studio poker night, and we'd all get around a table and play poker and drink beer, and that's where kind of some of our
create
and some of our, because I guess, I mean, there's some very, very bright people that work at Holition. I'm very, very lucky and absolutely in awe of them. Having spoken about my own meandering lack of academic success, there's some very smart people there, and smart people work in their zone. They get given problems and they deal with it, and actually, the sound of work at Holition is silence. Everybody's very dedicated and getting on with it,
grinding,
but in their little zone. So poker was a chance to get a mathematician and a psychologist together with a filmmaker.
Wow.
And just chat, and someone would say, oh, have you seen this or have you seen that? And we were doing a piece of work at the Barbican for an exhibit with really great friends, Lauren Boker and from The Unseen.
Yeah.
And this was sort of clothing that uses data to change colour. And we were talking about where this data was going to come from. And someone was like, oh, Elon Musk has got these Starlink satellites measuring our communications, but they're also measuring data from the cosmos, measuring solar flares and solar wind and radiation flares and stuff. And we were like, well, maybe we should tap up Elon Musk and see if we can get that data, which we did.
Wow.
So that kind of comes out
cool.
of these, I think what we kind of learned is that you can definitely get great ideas from formalized creative breakouts, but some of the really good ideas, some of the kind of, this is really crazy, but why don't we do this? They come out in the more informal ways. So the formal brainstormings end up being
kind of
very
limits
on brand.
you, right?
Yeah,
in a
very
way.
on brand.
Yeah, they are.
But it's those little kind of cherries on top of the cake that come from beer, poker, and other alternative
it kind of eases
forms of creativity.
Yeah, because it's like out of the ordinary, right? And I feel like this taps into psychology a little bit, but you kind of don't associate yourself at your desk in a meeting room, or whatever it is. Like there's more freedom in kind of doing things that aren't typical to, like you said, in a brand where you'd have those organized sessions.
And I think also, we made a decision very early on, never to hire anyone from luxury, fashion or beauty, which sounds mad, doesn't it?
That's quite interesting.
Well,
I would have thought otherwise.
I know. Well, we did that because, and I mentioned at the beginning, one of the very first meetings I ever had at Holition was with a guy called Bernard Fournard, who was chief executive of Cartier, and my co-founder Lynn and I, we sat in this amazing sort of imperial office in Geneva with huge, great high ceilings and open windows to the lake, and he sat behind it like some sort of emperor, basically, which he was. And I remember him saying, Jonathan, all this digital stuff, it's all very interesting, but until somebody can demonstrate to me that the internet will still be here in 3 years, Cartier is not going to go off and do anything mad and crazy in digital. So that's kind of where that bar was. There was not a lot of, not imagination, but there wasn't an appreciation of digital. So
how long ago was this?
It was about 15, 16 years,
okay.
16 years.
But he's changed his mind since then.
Oh, well, he has. And actually, to be, sorry, I've been rather rude about him. He became one of the most forward thinking in terms of digital CEOs.
Yeah.
But that attitude was very prevalent. And, the reality in large corporates is no one gets fired for saying no, because no is the status quo. People only really get into trouble if they suggest something that is a bit risky and a bit unusual and it doesn't work. So I didn't want anybody at Holition that had been hardwired by, being brutalized in the luxury world at saying no. I wanted people to say yes. I wanted people to say, to look at problems and find a solution and to circumvent issues and to use. And I think also, when I was in luxury, I remember having a conversation with a managing director who said, look, Jonathan, until you've spent 35 years in luxury, don't you tell me about luxury. And 25 years ago, when Richard said that, that might have been very valid, right? But nowadays, like, what does your 35 years in luxury mean when you're trying to talk to a Chinese millennial using, TikTok? Nothing, absolutely nothing. And actually,
very true.
The interesting thing about the impact of digital into luxury fashion and beauty has been external knowledge coming in. So, a lot of the technology that comes in is, social media technology or stuff that's come from gaming or, like augmented reality or virtual try-ons or magic mirrors or, some of the, or data science coming in from kind of other realms. And actually luxury that used to be a very closed realm isn't anymore. I mean,
I
Ian
even
Rogers
heard
from
TikTok.
Apple became head of innovation at Louis Vuitton. These kind of crossovers are far more like on message when it comes to digital than, someone that's been there forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I was even thinking, like, I read a stat somewhere where TikTok last year was like ranked higher than Google as like the most used search engine. So
and Apple sells more Apple watches than the entire Swiss watch industry.
wow.
So I mean,
Bonkers.
those kinds of interesting ideas from outside are again, they're a very important part of us, which is why, very rudely said, we weren't going to employ anyone from luxury fashion and beauty. But the flip side is we almost always employ, not always, but almost always employ straight from university. And that means that might be 28 with a PhD in computer science from UCL.
It's not just bachelors.
No, but it might be, 21 with an MA in fashion management from LCF. And what often happens is the students come to us and they're very, one of the things I'm interested in changing with the British School of Fashion or work we do with London College of Fashion is around trying to change the way that some of these degrees are taught, because it's very binary. It's very student to teacher.
Yeah.
And therefore students understandably get very protective about their ideas. That doesn't work when they come and work with us. And in fact, we often get employees starting with like, this is my idea, and someone else will go, oh, that's great, but why don't we change it and do that? And they're like, you're not changing my idea. And it's only when they start going, oh yeah, but that's great, but actually if you bolt onto my idea, I can bolt onto that, and we can really get. So that's that moment, that sort of magic moment when you're really starting to get ideas building onto each other, because none of us are geniuses, right?
No. I think it takes more than one person to create a fabulous idea. It's like,
by the way, a lot of those geniuses are pretty foul people. Steve Jobs, wasn't a particularly pleasant guy.
I've heard rumors.
Elon Musk as well. Elon Musk, etc., etc.
That brings me on to another question, actually. Because you mentioned Elon Musk, you mentioned Cartier. Who are like the most, if you have, famous people or person that you've worked with, networked with, or just collaborated with due to your line of work in luxury fashion and beauty?
Well, I mean, so I guess we're thinking about the sort of the unusual characters, and again, that was Lee McQueen, without a shadow of a doubt. I do find these people interesting because they've just got an X factor. They're the kind of people that you could be sitting in the middle of a field in the darkness and you still talk about them. And I think those people are interesting, but they're very, very rare. Probably that's a good thing, right? But no, I mean, the sort of the people, the brands that the sort of projects that I've really enjoyed are the ones that are, a little bit different, where actually the brands will surprise you. Work we've done with Dunhill, some of the there's a fashion show we did for Dunhill a few years ago that was an enormous kind of holographic show in Shanghai. And what was great about that was it was quite early in the sort of technical sort of movement, and I was I was really impressed by their audacity and their bravery. I think Hermes are the same. We did. I love working with Hermes because Hermes again are a bit like Holition anti-technology, right? They're very comfortable with who they are. Hermes. They're not trying to be Burberry, perhaps pretending to be Apple.
Yeah.
Embracing technology as a sort of because it's cool, right?
Yeah.
Hermes are like, no, we know who we are. We're a French, luxury manufacturer with a specialization in saddles and leatherware, and that's what we are. And actually, they've produced, I think, one of the best fashion tech products ever, which is the Apple Watch with the beautiful strap. So that's like Apple does its Apple thing, but we know how to make this incredible watch. So we were asked to do that. So the first time they'd ever looked at technology in store, they asked us whether we would build 10 windows, completely different ideas in 10 stores in 10 different countries, but each thing had to have a little piece of technology, and all the technologies had to be different, so that they could get a sense as to the value of technology in store. And one of the things I think is very interesting, well, in fact, Hermes, the creative director, Pierre-Alexis Dumas, he's the reason why I kind of really wanted to get into Holition, because I saw him speak he's a really amazing guy, and I saw him speak. He's one of those people. There we go. It's him.
With the X Factor.
It's him, yeah. So I heard him speak at a luxury conference in Paris in the analog world of the mid-1990s.
Right.
And at this conference, it was only for luxury. So all of the audience were CEOs of LVMH and head of marketing, and the audience were the industry. And he stood up on stage in the analog world and said, when he looks at Hermes products, he doesn't see them as basically being part of the brand. And in those days, if your products in your store were not, the typification of your brand, then what on earth was? And what he was saying was, he was looking at a row of ties hanging in a store, and he saw them as having no personality. He described them as being like a line of soldiers, all looking the same, all dull, all boring. Yeah, and then he said, but what's interesting me is when someone buys that product and walks out of the store and then uses it in their life. And so he got very interested. Like most brands saw the story ending once the customer had left the store, because the store was the brand world, the yachts on Monaco. Most people don't have those, but when you walk into the kind of Gucci universe, you're part of it. But the moment you walk out, you're just another citizen. Pierre-Alexis saw it in the opposite way. The moment you walk out, you're using our products in your lives. You're all using it in a different way. And I'm interested in that. So he created this site, J'aime mon carré, I love my scarf, I love my square, and asked people to take photographs of themselves wearing these products. And then he created and that's kind of like Instagram, Pinterest. It was like the forerunner of social media. And I think he's a very, very interesting guy. So with those windows, what most brands do is a central design team will design the windows, and then every store in the world has to do the same design. So a bit like a McDonald's, where wherever you are, it's the same burger, same windows. Same brand. Hermes is like, Pierre-Alexis sets a theme, but then not just every country, every store can decide how they will interpret that theme. So what Hermes does is they kind of unleash a blizzard of creativity. And then on his wall behind his desk, he's got photographs of every single store and how they've done those creative ideas. So it's all completely different, and he can sit back and go, look, I've instigated all of this. So so he's an interesting guy, and that project was fascinating. Really interesting. And also Hermes are so playful and fun, and they've got such a light, I think LV, Louis Vuitton, and this is not a criticism at all, but they're very sort of strong and not brash, but they're very sort of old school French, and powerful, and there's a slightly intimidating feel to them, to what they do. Whereas Hermes are the opposite type of French, sort of a bit of a frolic and a playful touch. They're a very nice company to work for or with.
Well, that sounds really good. I guess in terms of your personality, just looking within, then what trait would you say that you kind of owe your success to with building Holition and being able to work with incredible premium brands like you mentioned?
I mean, first of all, I'm mean, it doesn't feel like a success because every day's another struggle and a challenge. You know,
The small hurdles
we are
that we all
small, and
have.
we are small, and the world is big, and you know, there's a lot of large feet wanting to kind of trample us down. But I guess, I mean, you know, in the end, when you look at Holition, we're a collection of different skills.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, my skill is, I guess, you know, I've found my voice and I can communicate. So, and I think one of the things that we did quite early, and this goes back to marketing, right? So I am a marketing director. I can't extract that DNA from me. It is what I am. So when we started, I think we were quite clever in the way that we set ourselves up as being different. Because, like, again, marketing is differentiation, and I've always been interested in, you know, those dark spaces, dark matter, the kind of places where you can maneuver yourself into when no one else is, places that you can own and make your own. And again, when we started with this, there was a lot of there was not a lot, but there was a number of technology companies that we were joining.
Yeah.
And those technology studios or agencies, what their superpower was technology, not the way they did it, but what they were doing, the thing that they were doing. And so one day they'd be working for like the film launch of Iron Man, and the next day they'd be working for a toothpaste company, and the next day they'd be doing
So very
this.
varied.
Very, very varied.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, the reality is that I'm not a technologist. What can we do? So we kind of thought, right, well, why don't we call ourselves an anti-technology company first? Why don't we say, well, we're not a technology company, but we work within luxury, fashion, and beauty. So we understand those verticals. And that means that when we, you know, talk to a marketing director of Gucci, we can say, we sat on your side of the desk. We understand, you know, your fears and your concerns because we had them too. And so we will not compromise on quality, and we will make sure that whatever it is that we build, it's right for your brand because we understand your world. So that differentiated ourselves immediately.
Because it gives them that promise, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it gives them that kind of comfort. And I think, you know, so there was that. And then the other thing I think that I probably learned to be a bit Machiavellian and a bit naughty is, yeah, I'm at a stage in my career where I don't mind what I say anymore, and I don't mind who I say it to. So I'm quite happy to, you know, make powerful people feel uncomfortable because there's a competing brand doing something that they're not doing.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, I probably got a solution for you, you know, and so, you know, that could be Karl Lagerfeld, who we had a sort of interesting conversation with, you know, and they come in feeling very confident, and I can make them leave feeling a little bit less confident and a little bit more worried that perhaps in this digital world that is very different to fashion and
to what they know,
day
to day,
that actually the fact that they don't understand it is an issue, and maybe Jonathan and Holition can help.
So what would you say helped you to kind of become that powerful internally?
Maybe it's that arrogance that I was talking about when I was at
when
university.
you were in uni.
Yeah, maybe it's resurfaced.
Is it just the years of experience?
I think it must be. Yeah, I think it must be.
Or anything specific?
I mean, we all, at some point in our lives, we all find our voice.
Yeah.
And that's a really important moment. And, you know, if I've got any suggestions to anybody, it's, you know, find that voice. And what I mean by that, it's that moment when, and you can feel it, well, I felt it, when suddenly I was talking with authority, and I wasn't talking from a point where I'm chancing it. I'm doing something that I'm not totally sure about. I'm not totally convinced myself to, actually, I'm not that bad at this. I've got lots to learn. I'm at the start of a journey, but I've got something to learn about it. And for me, it came quite late, to be honest. It came kind of in my late 20s. Right. I was head of marketing at Map and Web and Gara, but I still hadn't quite found it. But then there was a big investment went into the company, and that investment allowed the organizations to hire M&C Saatchi, and some very smart people came down from M&C Saatchi, who were bright people. And I suddenly found that actually I could hold my own with them, and actually the way that they were thinking was interesting to me. And I think finding your voice is a really, you know, you got to, and so one of the bit, you know, I do a lot of mentoring to young startups, and one of the things that I say to them is, you know, absolutely sort of relentlessly pursue any speaking opportunities that you possibly can, because there's nothing better to get you thinking about who you are and what you do than standing up in front of 500 strangers and trying to explain it succinctly and on point, and seek out all of those opportunities. And I sometimes find that, if I'm speaking, I speak at a lot of conferences or panel sessions or whatever, and I sometimes feel that even now, if I just walk on up there and start speaking, I've kind of got this little. It doesn't quite work. I've got to make myself nervous. I've got to give myself the edge. And quite often, I'll just before I speak, I'll disappear into a toilet and look myself in the mirror and kind of go, why on earth do you think you know what the hell you're talking about? And no one out there has a clue who you are. Why on earth are they? And you start getting yourself a bit nervous, and then that's your game face and kind of get on. But it also means that you fine tune your story, right? And some of my team have gone off to start up their own startups in completely different spaces. And again, I've found them speaking roles and speaking jobs, and it just gives them that confidence. So that's kind of what you need. I think once you've found it, and when you found it, you know it, then you're off. Then it's fine tuning.
It's all about it. All relates to self-identity,
completely,
right?
Yeah.
Whether it's like you're saying, I think putting yourself in uncomfortable situations helps a lot. If you're someone that doesn't like to talk, whether it's, I don't know, presentations at uni, or if you're a student, whether it's presenting in your corporate job, volunteering to present and all that kind of stuff, the more you hear yourself talk, the more you understand yourself. Yeah. It sounds so silly to say it like that, but I think it's got a lot to do with it.
It's absolutely completely right. I mean, who are we all? And again, I'm just talking about this kind of voice thing, but beforehand, I was trying to be someone that I wasn't. After that, I knew better about who I was and what I could do and what was possible and what I liked, and I was more confident about expressing that. And in the end, all of us, we talk about marketing, but marketing, we're all marketing ourselves the whole time. We're all trying to find an individual personality. We're borrowing from people that we admire or trends that we like. So we're borrowing identities from other people, but we're trying to fuse it into our own and try and make it our own. And that's that's what marketing is all about, right?
Yeah, I think we're constantly influenced, like you're saying, with trends, with social media, that it's constantly adding to what our core really and naturally is. I think reading up on like Chinese methodology or something, I remember they mentioned something like each individual has 3 faces. So one that you keep for yourself, one that you have in front of family and friends, family, and then one that you have like whether it's at work, for example. So it's just quite interesting how we all have our own different identities in a way.
One of my team is one who basically does an amazingly good job. One of my senior team members, but doesn't always believe it herself, but she should, because she's amazing. She takes acting lessons, and there's lots of improvisation and stuff like that.
I've heard improvisation's really good.
Yeah,
and self-confidence.
And I was like, what was the one you were doing last week? And she said, and she was saying, right, I had to play like an unreliable boyfriend. This kind of stuff.
That would have been fun.
But again, seek those out, because anything and any opportunity to just get you to test like where the edges are of your comfort zone, I think is really important. I'm not suggesting that anyone crosses that boundary, but explore what you can do, and I think you'll be surprised.
I'm really glad that we're actually discussing like self-belief, self-confidence, because I actually didn't plan to kind of add this to the interview, but I feel like it's such a important theme in today's society, with social media, pressure in society, that kind of stuff. I feel like people also feel like they don't know who they are. They will lack that self-belief because there's so many personalities, so many people telling you what to do and how you should be. So if people are listening out there, I think these great tips that we've just discussed will definitely help to understand yourself a little bit more. There's so much more you can do as well.
Well, I think also because I think, and again, I'm not making this point that strongly. I don't want to make this point that strongly, but I think there are questions to be asked about the whole ethos of luxury fashion and beauty and the role that they play. And we did there was a piece that was commissioned by the British Fashion Council at London Fashion Week, and the BFC wanted to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
And it was, that had been the year when poor Kate Spade took her life, and there was a lot of conversation around sort of abuse on models and anorexia and stress and anxiety throughout the industry, and the BFC wanted to talk about this, but just wanted a piece that they could kind of use as a springboard to get publicity. And we were also interested in talking about that slightly sort of dystopian place where kind of a perception of like online perfection then clashes with like the reality of just us as humans, and that feeling of kind of low self-esteem that might be generated by that. So we made a dress made out of leather and ceramics, and that dress scans the mind of the wearer. And then again, it's that data piece, but now the data was actually people's brainwaves, so that you could and then the dress changed colors and patterns according to how you feel. So you could then you were literally wearing your heart on your sleeve. And what was interesting was that we did it for three reasons. One, it had been commissioned, obviously. A second one was a very good friend of the studio had a stroke and was paralyzed from the neck down and couldn't speak, and we wanted to see whether fashion could give a voice back to people who can't communicate using the standard means. But we also wanted to talk about privacy and data and all of that stuff that you're talking about. And people wore the dress and felt very uncomfortable showing the world how they're feeling, but 2 hours earlier had been posting on Facebook they're having a miserable day. And there was something sort of really odd and interesting about not wanting to open up in front of people in a face-to-face way, but quite happily, posting to strangers.
Yeah.
And there was just something there which I thought was, and a lot of the sort of less obvious branded work and the more kind of cultural work that we do with brands sort of fits into that way, about talking about things that are not about fashion, allowing brands to the ability to talk about stuff that's not purely about product. They can be talking about climate change, or we've done work around dementia or work around refugees for the United Nations, and all of that is part of this. And I think when we think about brands, one of the things that I like about the impact of digital is, when I was an analog marketing director, there was there was no digital. So you used to look at brands in terms of product, the shop, the logo, the corporate color that went on the bag, that had the logo, that had the product that you walked out of their store. And that's basically it. Like, and I was a kid, went to school near Harrods. Harrods was a big building with a green identity and a gold H on it, and that was it. You knew nothing about it. But now with digital, you can interrogate these brands from all different directions and across a whole variety of different types of narratives. Those can be cultural, political, product-based, cultural-based, heritage-based, anything, absolutely anything. And so the kind of storytelling opportunities for these brands has massively expanded. And we'd done work in the past for Burberry. I remember having a chat to one of their social media managers. And they were saying that what they do with Burberry is they commission like a very eclectic range of content, and it could be like something a bit sort of sexy and French and clubbish here, and something's about heritage here, and something's about tradition there, and
very versatile.
And you put it all on a table. And then different people will pick up the content that's relevant to them. So, my daughter will pick up very different content to you or to me. So what you end up with is a brand, it's the same brand, but different people are viewing it in fundamentally different ways. And we really like that, because that feels quite kind of human, right? Because we're different, as humans, we're different people at different times of the day, different days of the week. We're different at the weekends than we are in a corporate world. We're different on holiday. We're happy, we're sad, sometimes we're upset, sometimes we're tired, sometimes we're cross and angry, and we're just, there's an infinite variety there defined by our personality. And I'm really interested in how digital tools can do the same for brands, right? So brands aren't just talking about like the expected stuff, but the unexpected stuff. And I've always been fascinated by that kind of insight, where the teachers that really I respected were the ones that didn't tell me what to think, but encouraged me to find out. So that idea of discovering something means so much more. And I think, those are the brands that are doing this well, where you spot something, particularly something that's human, that's not about another bloody kitten heel.
Oh, crikey. No, I totally agree. I think when brands like consider the individuality of the audience rather than, oh, hey, this is out now, but go buy it or whatever, right? There's stuff like BTS nowadays where they show what's going on behind the scenes, whether it's catwalks, whether it's actually making a product, ASMR. There's like so many things people do to like break down their products, and whether it's like personal emotions that the brand has associated with their products and services. Well, all of that then gets relayed to different consumers at different times, and they all kind of relate to it in different ways, and that's how they engage.
I think there's got to be a seismic shift in that, though, because you're absolutely right. That's how it's done. But I mean, and I'm being very disingenuous and rather mean here about the sort of the retail world. But the idea of, and going back to like seeking out negative space, there's so much of like, you bought those trousers, so here's another pair of trousers. And actually, what I think is so interesting about some of the opportunities around AI, and particularly around product recommendation, is not to drive you into the areas where you feel comfortable, but to show you some areas of opportunity which you wouldn't have thought about. So like, you like those trousers, but here's a blouse in a completely different, that you wouldn't normally wear, but that's absolutely right for you. Or you bought those trousers, have you tried this novel? or have you thought about that wall color? Just something like that. Because one of the things because you either look at fashion as like a way of fitting in with a tribe, whether that's as an individual or not, or as a way of like, and same with art, right? Same with any form of kind of culture, as a way of discovering something really new that you thought was incredible. And that's what AI should be doing, I think. It shouldn't be, I mean, there's that irony, isn't there, with the internet, where, the reality is, with the internet, you've got perfect access to every piece of information, all of the information, but with search engines and algorithms, instead of looking, like through a huge telescope at the heart of the universe, you're looking through a microscope at something that's only relevant to you. And I just kind of want to expand. I want to explore. I want to expand. I'm not prepared for a brand to tell me what I may or may not like.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're all different, aren't we? We're all. Yeah. And how does the brand know that we're all completely different and what our motivations are? Well, it's through data and using AI to interpret that data.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of starting to see it take over more and more, which is quite great. So for those starting up an agency or even kind of wanting to start becoming a freelancer in marketing, let's say, what would you say could help those that are watching to start to attain regular clientele? Is there anything that you would suggest, whether from experience or people that you know, what kind of would work well if they're just starting up and they want to start get into a rhythm of getting regular customers?
Well, again, I sort of said that everything was carnage and chaos when we started. I mean, we'll come on to that bit, but just in terms of starting up, I mean, there are a few things that I think are really important. So the first thing is if you're starting up a new venture, whether it's on your own or with a studio, definitely understand a P&L, understand accounting, understand how to run a business from a finance point of view. It's absolutely critical. I never did that until I started Holition, because the brands I was working for had finance teams. So it never kind of occurred to me. But if it's your business, you need to understand burn rate, runway, how long have you got? And then that then helps you make the right decisions to what you were saying about like how many doors do I have to kick in, and what kind of doors do I need to kick in? And so that's a really important thing about that. And one of the things that I kind of learnt, and this is a Jonathan thing, I'm not saying it's the right way to kind of do it, but I never look at sales.
Right.
I'm not interested in sales. I'm only interested in cash flow. So obviously the two are connected, obviously. But, I'm interested in how much cash have I got coming in? Can I cover the salaries? And yes, obviously you need sales to deliver cash flow. But for example, we were doing work with Coty, who have, a whole load of beauty brands in America, like Rimmel and Max Factor and CoverGirl and bloody blah. They used to, I was going to say a rude word there, but they are very unfair and mean to their suppliers. And so you don't get paid for 4 months.
Crikey.
So you do work and then you don't get paid for 4 months. So, so you can have sales but not get the money till well after Christmas. That's not going to help you when you want to pay your... So you might decide not to work for Coty and to find other people that will pay you, faster. So cash flow is kind of really critical. That's kind of one thing.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking cash flow, you start looking at what's going out. That then meant that in the beginning when we had very few sales, we just had 2 of us and a dog and a telephone in a room that wouldn't ring. We were when we looked at logos and websites and things, we weren't going to start hiring agencies. We lectured at London College of Fashion, and we said to a course, the graphics design course at Central St Martin's, we'll tell you about innovation, how we see it. By the way, everyone on this course, please design us a logo if you wish, and anyone that designs us a logo will give you 20 quid, and if somebody does a logo that we really like, we'll give you 50 quid. Right, that's the logo. and we just did everything like on a sort of shoestring, because every time we spent money, what we did is we reduced our runway and brought forward the time where we'd go bankrupt. And every time we were able to save money, we pushed that runway out. So the reality is when you start your own venture, it's not about technology or marketing or changing the world or finding the right fashion. It's about survival. That's it. And what can you do to survive? So I mean that's the first thing. And then if you survive, then you've got an opportunity to change the world, right? But you've got to have that kind of solid foundation. And then just be very open and frank with yourself about like who you are. Find that narrative, find that story, find those conferences or those panel sessions or those podcasts where you can talk about what you do, because that will then perfect it. So the way that I would talk at a conference is no different to the way I would talk to Chanel.
Right.
So that, again, because it's all muscle memory, right?
Yeah. That's really interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, I think that's quite valuable information. And I think a lot of viewers will definitely appreciate the honesty.
Well, it's how it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's how we found it. But I often say to the startups that I mentor, like Jonathan's rule number 1 is don't listen to a word that Jonathan says, because you'll find the right way yourself. Yeah.
Right.
You'll find the right way yourself. This is just how it worked for us.
Yeah. I think it's a really good story, and it's quite inspiring in a way. Just listening to yourself, finding that your own voice.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, surviving is essential to opening up the doors.
You're not going to change the world if you haven't survived.
Yeah. I think a lot of us get excited and forget about that part. So.
Well, but that's fair enough, right? Because the reason why I get asked to sort of mentor is, I meet a lot of startups that have come up with their idea in college, and they're passionate about saving the world. But I think that's really, I'm so impressed with startups. And when I was starting up, and maybe for the next 5 or 6 years, the startup world was actually quite... there were some amazing startups there, but there was also another side to it, which is I'm just coming up with an idea because I want to make some money. Like, all I'm doing is coming up with an idea to get some investment, because then if I get some investment, I can fake it till I make it, and I can sell it at a multiple of X, and I can make money, and therefore I can get my Maserati and own my rectory in Gloucestershire, and I'm done, right? So they were starting up not to start up, but to make money. And I think, that's different now, and I'm really pleased to see it. I meet really inspiring founders who are not there to make money. They're there to make the world a better place. They're there to create sustainability, or to create narratives around, ecology, or, a lot of fashion brands aren't fashion brands, they're ecology brands, or, and I think those, and they're not there to make money. They're there to kind of change the world. So I think those are very interesting. A lot of that comes out of university and conversations that they're having at university with co-founders, and they're passionate about their mission, but actually other stuff, important housekeeping's got to happen around the periphery of it. If you're not going to save the world if you can't keep yourself going. So that's kind of a lot of what I do, is help them understand that, right? Not fine tune their offer, because they're doing it much better than I, because they believe it's them, and they can, to the point we were talking about before, they found their voice and they can talk about it with passion, and I'm buying it. I mean, I see it in their eyes. I'm in. It's that stuff around the edge that's got to be done. The platform's got to be strong enough to hold their weight.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say, I mean, there are people that are kind of more inspired with like the monetary gain side of things versus people that have an ethos and a mission in life. Would you say there is, from your own experience, a major difference whether you are just money kind of inspired versus if you have like this dream of saving the world? Do you think you could have different results?
I didn't know that. That's a good question. I mean, I guess when I do, we were doing some work for Ericsson a couple of years ago about climate change, and Ericsson make 5G, right? And this is not to denigrate them, because they're lovely and good friends, and I'm a big fan of Ericsson, but they're engineers. So a lot of what they were thinking about when it came to the power of 5G was like hardware, like they had some sort of robotic glove that was a surgeon's glove, and there's somebody, in London could be operating on a child in Africa, or
Wow.
self-driving cars or things such as that. And again, our sort of view was all of that's great, but and not to sort of dissipate the importance of each of those individual innovations, but they're small.
Yeah.
5G is planetary, right? So
Yeah,
what's gonna, so for example, what is gonna solve, 5G is gonna solve climate change. It's in my view, in my humble opinion, it's going to absolutely change climate change, because solve climate change, because what is 5G? It's what's driving your phone, and I think one of the things that is going to resolve a lot of this is the idea of peer pressure. And actually what is right and what is wrong. It's your generation and the generations that come after you, and there's going to be behaviours that are just deemed to be unacceptable. Whether it's around purchasing, recycling, your attitude to, cloth and the types of, whatever it is. In fact, we're talking about fashion now.
Yeah.
There are going to be, I was speaking at a conference at London College, at a course at London College of Fashion, and a few years ago, and we were talking about like not buying so much, and a student stood up and said, "What's great about Primark is that I can buy a new T-shirt every day," and you could feel the air being like, oh my God. And the poor girl, I felt so sorry for her. She was not from the UK. And you could see in her eyes, she suddenly realized that what she said was exposed her as being crass and ignorant. And in the 70s, when I was like, 5 or 6 or 7, my parents would quite happily stick me in a car, drive to a friend, get completely pissed at a dinner party, drive back, no seatbelts.
Oh no!
Because that's like what you did in the 70s. Like drinking and driving was a sign of being macho and being able to take your drink. Nowadays, you wouldn't have them as friends. If friends of yours drank with their small kids in the back of a car and didn't bother about seatbelts, you wouldn't have them as friends.
No, you wouldn't get in the car.
So behaviour that goes against the kind of climate crisis won't be friends of yours. And so peer pressure is important. And storytelling and calling things out. I mean, that's social media is doing that. And if 5G is accelerating that, then that's what's going to do it. And I took a lot of my gang to see Al Gore speaking on climate change. And, he was again of the view that actually it's going to be, public perception is going to change, and it's going to be social media. It's going to be one of the biggest drivers of that. So I guess, we're always looking for the bigger ideas. And I think a lot of technology companies, or maybe some of our competitors, are very focused on AR or VR or AI or holography, or we're not interested in the hardware. You can have the world's most expensive television, but if you're watching bad content, your experience is poor.
Yeah,
it's actually about the narrative. It's actually about the story, and then use technology to amplify that. But let's understand it's about storytelling.
Definitely, I agree with the fact that social media is one of the key, I think, influences on public opinion. When you read the news through social media, instantly you have an opinion. You wake up one morning,
for better and for worse, right? Because some of it is like 100%. Hijacked, and the algorithms that push you into the echo chambers.
Yeah.
And, so I'm not blind to the problems there, but the opportunities too.
Yeah, definitely. So you've mentioned a few times that you are a mentor to a few people. And obviously you've worked on kind of a multiple amount of advisory boards, so BBC, school, the British School of Fashion and the British Fashion Council.
Yeah, and the Tate.
Oh yeah, so quite a few. In terms of being a mentor then, what would you say are two things you've discovered people needed more encouragement or motivation with from a personal angle through your experience?
So yeah, that's a great.
Is it like
really
a recurring
so,
theme or something?
So so I guess they sort of fit into, there are sort of three. They fit into three kind of groups.
Mm-hmm.
There's the group we talked about, which is more the sort of the universities and the academic universities, and a lot of those conversations are about, well, it fits into two different ways. One is like, how can students start their journey, basically? Yeah. Are there any tips to starting your journey? And we've touched a bit on that earlier. The other bit is, on the academic side, is how to structure courses. And I talked about that sort of very linear way. You know, a lot of courses are like module 1.1, module 1.2, and then you do module 1.3, and you can't do module 1.5 until you've done 1.4. And the reality of my experience as a startup an entrepreneur, I hate that word, but someone that started something up, is everything's tumbling along at the same time. And so nothing works in a nice little sequence. You want the law stuff now. And then a bit later, like, oh my God, I need the accounting bit and whatever. So, you know, a lot of the work that I do with universities is about almost chopping that nice long kind of course up into segments, and then putting all those segments into a sort of library or repository or a bucket, and then supporting students, encouraging students to kind of create their ideas, but then they can reach in and grab the bit that's relevant at the moment that they need it, rather than when the teacher says,
when they think it's right for them.
Yeah. And that's kind of, and that experience of like, oh my God, I forgot the legal stuff. You know, I should have done that earlier. That's a really important like learning for like when they actually do it for kind of real.
Yeah.
And what we found in London College of Fashion with the innovation course is that a lot of the ideas that came out of that course, which were kind of just academic sandboxed ideas for startups, they then actually take them on and they make something with it. So I think that kind of, that's on the sort of academic side. And then there's the sort of the people like the Tate, for example.
Yeah.
And what they typically do is they've got their digital strategies and they just want it sense checked. Are they pushing far enough? Are they going fast enough? You know, what's our view on, you know, VR? I mean, I'm always quite kind of, you know, I'd never drank the Kool-Aid when it comes to some of these things. And we always look at these technologies, at Holition, we look at these technologies in the long term.
Right.
Because if you look at them in the long term, you immediately get the benefit of understanding the technology, but not worrying about the limitations of the hardware to access that technology. So, you know, VR is a really good case in point. You know, the idea of virtual worlds is enticing, intoxicating perhaps, but you know, having to strap on a kind of diving headset and experiencing, you know, cutting off from the world, and experiencing it through an uncomfortable sort of rather poor headset. By the way, they're amazing, but they're not, you know, it isn't virtual yet. It doesn't feel like it's a kind of seamless virtual world. So at one point, the Tate were thinking about, should they put all of their artwork in VR? And I was like, no, you shouldn't, because I don't know, it's like,
it's a gamble,
right? When I first went to Paris and I was living with a girlfriend after university over there, and you first see the Eiffel Tower, or you first see the Empire State Building, or you first see the Taj Mahal, or wherever it is, or people first see Big Ben. There's like a, whoa, I've seen images of that all over the world on, you know, I mean, it's such a familiar image, but to see it firsthand for the first time, it's like it's a powerful thing.
Like a pinch me moment.
Get that in VR. VR's like looking at a postcard, and like I remember I used to be I'm a friend of the Royal Academy, and one year a few years ago they had a great exhibition of Van Gogh, and they had the sunflowers and they had his self-portrait in the very last gallery, and it was so popular that the queues were going down Piccadilly, but as a friend you can just walk in. So I used to walk in on my way to work and get there literally as the doors were opening. So you just walk straight in, and everyone's starts in the first gallery and then moves into the second, if you just walked right the way down the end, you'd be in this gallery with these two amazing pictures and a security guard and no one else. You'd have about 20 minutes just to look at it in the peace and quiet of admiring
Before it gets
piece of art.
crazy.
And again, those pieces of art, the sunflowers, they're so well known. You've seen them everywhere, but to see it in the flesh, and I think, I'm just really, this is why we talk a lot about storytelling, because, technology shouldn't replace kind of human emotion and human experience. It needs to do something else. And again, thinking about that Dunhill project, the fashion show I was telling you about, the girl next to me, who was head of Vogue in Asia, at the end of the show, she was having a quiet tear. And it was a very beautiful, I'm saying it myself, but we put together a very beautiful show. It wasn't the kind of bang, bang, bang of the classic kind of Victoria's Secret show and lights and glamour. It was, we tried to do something completely different and tell a story. And we don't deliberately try and get our clients crying. It happens. It does happen. But we'd use technology to communicate something that was valuable to her. And I thought that was really nice. Yeah. And then the final bits are the startups. You just need all that sort of, what they need is just someone to say, you can do it. And also, by the way, you're doing well.
Yeah.
You're doing well.
It's cheering them on,
actually,
isn't it?
you're doing the right things in the right order. You're doing okay. Just keep at it and it'll start, it'll start unlocking.
I think that's why it's important to have a very supportive circle when you are starting up, especially if you're doing it alone. It can be quite a lonely process, and self-criticism will definitely jump up.
So that's that's such a great point. Don't start up alone, guys. Don't do it alone. You need, it's the loneliest place, and in the middle of the night, all those doubts creep in.
Yeah.
You need someone to talk to. I've got it.
Yeah.
I've got it. I just need someone to say, yeah, you're right. You're doing
That's
okay.
all you need, really, isn't
particularly
it?
when it's difficult.
Yeah.
Like, just hang in there. You're doing okay. There's nothing you're doing wrong. And let's go and have a drink. You need that person. And in fact, a lot of so we talked about like inspirational people. They tend to be very individual. And again, we also said that a lot of them aren't very pleasant people to even be with. Not all, some of them amazing. But again, for the rest of us mere mortals, find a co-founder that you like and will, and you trust. Obviously,
and that shares that vision.
And shares your vision. That's such a good point. Yeah, you're completely right. I utterly agree with that.
Yeah, I think it can be hard. I mean, I've known a few people over the years that have started their own company, and some of them struggle with having someone that shares that same vision as them. It's the whole thing about trusting they'll have the same kind of work ethic and just balancing everything together. So those that do have a kind of co-partner for their startup, I think, can be really lucky people, because it's almost like finding that other piece of the puzzle, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and if that other person's got complementary skills,
yes,
then
perfect
you're
combination.
You're away.
100%. Great. So just actually coming to the end of the lovely interview. It's been so great to just absorb all of this knowledge. So looking back at kind of you as an individual then in this lovely world that you work in, what does an average day for Jonathan look like? So let's say you're at the start of the week, Monday morning. What would your routine look like?
So I'm really fortunate in that about a year before the pandemic, we moved out of London. So we're only 200 metres out of London, but we are officially in Surrey, not too far. So we're just on the opposite side of the River Thames.
Right.
So during lockdown, we had space, Bushy Park, Home Park, River Thames, all of that worked really well. That was great. So, a typical morning will be, and then I was running a lot during the pandemic and after pandemic. So a typical morning will be, alarm goes off at 6, news channel.
So you're not part of the 5 a.m. club, as they...
No, but also I'm not part of the kind of midnight club too. Okay. So I need to, so reading is really important to me, and I really like reading books rather than kind of tablets. So, I'm usually sort of in bed about 11, do some reading, that kind of thing. So the alarm goes off at 6, and then I'll go for a run. So most days I'll do a kind of 5 to 8 mile run in the morning. And and recently I've started to get back into the office. So having been like really enjoying the hybrid working, which was like sort of
been a godsend. for
Officially,
most.
we say a couple of days a week in the office. It's not mandatory. It's not compulsory, but I'm paying a lot of money to rent an office. It'd be really nice to see you around there. So just so I don't feel like an absolute idiot spending all this money. But actually, it was interesting that the creative teams came back into the office quicker.
Right.
And in fact, most of them are in the office most days. The producers are often in the office because they practice those magic dark arts where they cajole, cuddle, kick, push, whatever it takes to get the work done on time to schedule. The strategy team are kind of like, we're kind of in most of the time, but not always. They're sort of like, whatever, I'm not that fast. The dev team took time to get in because they're very focused on the work that they are doing as individuals.
Right.
But actually, Thomas, my CTO, who joined us as an apprentice and is now head of technology, he and his management team are very good at getting them in at least 2 or 3 times a kind of week. So I'm going in more often now, sometimes 5 days a week, and I'm really, really enjoying that. So a typical day will be running, get in the office at 9, half an hour just to make a cup of coffee, run through some emails, and then it's just meeting.
Meetings.
A lot of internal. I used to travel a lot. I would travel somewhere every week.
You mean like
flights?
Oh, flights. International?
Yeah, I would do kind of every month. I would do at least 1 long haul and maybe 2 or 3 short haul. Very rarely now.
How comes that's changed?
Well, because people are used to Zooming and virtual now.
Virtual world.
So people are used to that. And
do you miss it?
No, I don't. I do, and I don't. I mean, it's a great point. I mean, I talked about like creativity is like being exposed to new ideas and new thinking, and traveling is part of that, right? Because you can go off and see museums or just walk around the streets of Bilbao or whatever it is and just see and explore new things. And I do miss that. There's no doubt about it. And there is, and I do get more out of meeting people, like just showing that you care, like you care enough to get on a plane and see them, and that does go down, or Eurostar and go to Paris. That does go down well. But I mean, on the flip side, right, carbon footprints and, just stuff like that. I mean, I don't know how, this is the difficult, we're at this kind of, Twix point, aren't we? Where like our behaviours matter. And, we're either going to talk about carbon footprint and climate change and actually do something about it, or it's just giving me a lot of hot air. So I haven't quite nailed what our official approach is, but we're definitely doing less travel. And then we're seeing, but that means I can spend more time with the team and we can spend more time in the pub in the evenings.
And that's the main thing, isn't it?
It is for
that's
them,
the most important thing.
because Dad pays. Dad typically pays, so.
What would they do without you?
Well, but then the important thing, I guess, also is, when we talk about, the loneliness of it, is, it's important for me to buy a couple of rounds and then get out, because the last thing they want is like, the CEO hanging around. They need, a bit like my kids, they need plenty of opportunity to do whatever they need to do as a kind of crew. And if that means they need to have a good old bitch off about, Jonathan or whatever it is, and that's fine, and I'm completely comfortable with that. So and again, once I had kids, I definitely wanted to get home, and when they were younger, I mean they're teenagers now, but read them stories and and that was really important. That's why I kind of did all this in the first place. So sitting on the sofa having dinner with my wife is important to me. It's just as important as hanging out all night clubbing. Those days are long behind me. Thank God for other clubbers.
They keep the business running, don't they?
Well, yeah, you're going to have to survive without me, without Jonathan pushing shapes on some random dance floor.
Oh, that's awesome. In terms of kind of your kind of keeping to your personal routine at work, how much time do you think goes into planning versus execution for you? Oh
God, what a great time. That's a great thing. I mean, not enough time goes into planning. And if I did all this again, I would elbow out more time for planning. And it's absolutely true. I mean, I mentioned it before that we're the plaything of environment and clients, and we're very responsive. I wish we weren't, but I wish I'd been able to do more planning. The only thing I would say is, no plan ever survives first contact with the enemy. So I've sort of rationalized it in my mind by saying, even if I had done all that planning, it wouldn't have made that difference, because like the first phone call from Burberry, everything changes. But that is, and I guess an illustration of that is, supply and demand. So, the thing that keeps me up at night is when we don't have enough work.
Yeah.
And then the thing that keeps me up at night is when I've got too much work. And how the hell can we do it? Because
where's the balance?
Because if I've got too much work, what am I going to do? Am I going to basically beat and best the team to kind of do it? Am I going to say no to a client, in which that creates that client we like, or I'm never giving you any more work? So I appreciate they're kind of first world problems, but they are issues. So there's probably a magic 10 minutes a year where supply and demand kind of matches. So I guess I'm only saying that as an illustration of you can only plan so far. But as a small studio, as any kind of studio, you're very reactive. And that also means that you have to make choices about, or maybe the opposite. Maybe you don't have the opportunity to make choices about projects. So, there are a couple of things that we've done that aren't on, a number of things that we've done that aren't on our website. We've done them because they brought cash in, but they're not the kind of projects that we feel
you want to illustrate.
Yeah. But we've done them anyway. And if we had planned, we probably would have said no. I mean, the kind of magic, I guess the sort of shifting point is when we can start to say no to projects that we don't want. And we have done in the past. One of the things about owning your own studio is that you can tell clients to take a hike.
Yeah.
And actually that's very important.
That must feel good though.
It does. It feels really good. I've told, there's two in particular that I probably better not mention, but they're very, very well-known fashion brands that I'm not prepared to work with you. I don't. And it's not the brand, it's that individual, right? I often say to my team, Holition isn't working with Chanel or Louis Vuitton or Hermes or Burberry. It's, these people working with those people. It's very much a kind of individual way. But it's important for my team also to recognize that, I care enough about them that I'm not prepared to have them put through crap.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty obnoxious people out there. But there may be agencies that are prepared to put up with that kind of crap. But we're not. For cash.
Yes. I think, when you work with clients, there is a transaction there, and it's not just financial.
Yeah.
I
mean, there was a time where I just walked in, we presented something, and I just sort of said, right, well, I'm collecting everything up, and we're leaving. And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, we're not working with you. And they're like, no, hold on, because they had their deadlines, right?
Oh,
they had a project
they were relying
that
on
they
you.
were committed, their boss to was going to go live. And I'm like, no, we're not going to work with you. And it's like, no, come back, let's have a chat about this. I'm like, no, I'm just taking everything. We are off. Go and find some other
really
poor
good
schmuck.
for you. I think it's important to stick to your guards and your guns and have your standards, especially if you know that you are working with people that are tough. And like going back to that whole kind of idea of transaction, just accepting any form of behavior just because you're getting paid for the job, I feel like shouldn't be acceptable. It has long-term effects on people.
I think it does. I mean, I imagine it'll have a long-term effect on their view on me, right?
Yeah.
Because I brought that work in. I've selected that. I've selected those people to work on that project. And why would I want to expose any of my team to the kind of the furnace of, fashion-related bullshit?
Yeah, there's
and prima donna, and jumping up and down and screaming and shouting. I'm not having it.
No, it's good that you have that mindset and I'm sure we're surrounded by people that don't really.
I have to say, it's quite
crap.
rare. It is, unfortunately, it is rare. Again, it's a human thing, right? Like again, it's that person in relation to that person in whatever that brand is, and actually, most people are pretty good. They're pretty straightforward and pretty, and if there are problems, it's usually come from on high.
Yeah.
No, I mean, 95% of the people that we work for are actually super. The kind of people you want to have as friends. Well, they are, right? Because
you build those long-term kind of relationships as well, don't you?
And I remember a chap called Pascal, who's now head of technology at Saint Laurent, and he was our project manager when we were doing a project for Vuitton. And I remember him saying, projects, the sort of trouble points are the start and the end. Like the start when you're all sort of fighting around the direction. Yeah. And then the middle bit's like you're just building it out. And then there's always problems at the end.
Towards the end.
Always at the end, like deadlines, things aren't working, stuff breaking, someone wants a last minute change.
Chaos.
Chaos, yeah. And so he's very big on like, he was very big on like, you need to have people that you like. Because if you all like each other, then you'll work your way through this.
Makes the process so much easier.
So for him, selecting an agency wasn't about price. It wasn't about quality. It was about trust.
Yeah. And allowing opinions to flow, I think, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I think that's
We've
quite
certainly got
key.
plenty of them, as you would have found out over the last hour.
Yeah, as I said, as we get to the last kind of roundup of questions, we had the golden and final question of the interview. Do you think AI is out to replace marketing jobs? And do you think it poses any threats?
You mean threats to humanity?
Yes.
To the survivability of the human race?
Exactly that.
Or fashion? Well, the two are combined. So the first question was about, will AI replace?
Yes.
Humans?
Is it out to get?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's out to get it, but it's inevitably going to replace it. And inevitably. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday at lunch. I mean, my wife used to be a journalist for Condé Nast, and you know, ChatGPT writes it now, right? We use ChatGPT to write our project pages. We used to do it internally, right, and not particularly well because we're not copywriters, but we made a good fist of it. Now we just, you know, we just feed it a number of pieces of text that we like that aren't related to the project, get it to learn how those ones work, and then ask it to write the web page for the latest fashion show we did for Tommy Hilfiger at New York Fashion Week last week. And bang, off it goes. And if you don't like it, you can say, can you write this a bit more formally, or can you write this to push the metaverse elements more? And well, sorry, as all of the listeners know, because I know that you're all kind of doing this. So
I think secretly a lot of people are doing it.
Yeah, I think so. And why wouldn't you, right? So it's already replacing marketing jobs. One of the reasons why my wife stopped working as a freelance writer after leaving Condé Nast was that the price per sentence, or the price per word, was going down and down and down. Now it must be zero.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big threat. So that's inevitably going to change. I mean, unfortunately, you know, the world is constantly evolving, and you know, technology the spinning jenny meant that, you know, weavers were going out of business back in the day. The first industrial revolution, you know, which used steam and, you know, water to mechanize production, put laborers out of, you know, the second industrial revolution, you know, the electrical revolution allowed huge assembly lines, you know, sort of artisanal workshops all went into Model T factories. And the third industrial revolution in the 70s, a digital industrial revolution, meant that robots were replacing people on assembly lines. And, you know, now we're into this fourth industrial revolution, which is interesting because it isn't about replacing, although we are talking about AI replacing labor, but it's meant to be about fusing, like physical, biological, technological. It's a collapsing of kind of different types of skills, and AI is one of them, in that it's trying to sort of humanize the kind of input and output of technology. So it is undoubtedly going to replace jobs. I guess the sort of glass half full side is, because that's happened throughout history, like the whole world's not unemployed. So I mean, I don't want to sound crass, but you know, AI is going to open up opportunities in different areas in the same way that it's shutting off opportunities, you know, in certain areas, and that's absolutely zero comfort to the people that are affected. But you know, equilibrium will be found somewhere, and technology will kind of move on. Is it a threat to humanity? Well, it might be, but if it is, then we've only got ourselves to blame, right? It's a bit like, you know, Peter Parker saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, we've always looked at, so the question is, are we responsible? Now, again, discuss, it could be, you know, there are lots of different ways you can do that. But I guess it goes back to that sort of anti-technology, technology narrative that Holition has, which is technology is a tool. So AI should be viewed as a tool that humans can use to make our lives, quote unquote, better,
easier,
or worse, you know, easier or less easy, depending on your point of view. But it's there to help or hinder us. It's meant to be there to help us, and sometimes it may hinder others. But it's meant to be there as a tool to help us. Now, if we let it get beyond that, then again, that's our fault.
Yeah.
So I guess the bit that does worry me about technology, and you think about, companies like Google, for example, they're bigger than countries, and their influence is global in a way that, and they're unelected, so at least we can kick our government out next year, and most other countries can, not every country, sadly, but you can't kick Google out, you can't kick Meta out, you can't kick Snap out, you can ban it, but you can't get rid of it. And one thing I do think about some of these large technological companies is it's impossible to control them. Unfortunately, we've seen it with trying to bulldoze Meta into removing content. They say they're doing it, but they're not.
Are they?
They're not. They're just, they're reducing a tiny bit of it, but the avalanche of it is they're just not dealing with it. And the authorities' ability to regulate that is muted. They can't control it. So AI is just steepening the innovation curve hugely. And the bit that worries me is more about how it's harnessed for bad.
Yeah. I think we're also yet to see the results of how bad it can.
But I don't see Skynet. Yeah. But just out of interest, my developers are using ChatGPT to write code. So they can plug in some code and ask ChatGPT to, amplify that code to do something else, and they get it all back in a heartbeat. And then they take that code and put it into the application and see what happens.
Yeah.
So
that must cut them a lot of time.
Well, it's a time. So then it's just
Yes.
steepening and steepening. So the only thing I would say about it is, in the next few years, I can see relative tranquility, but that curve is steepening and steepening, and we'll have to see.
Incredible. Yeah, I'm also quite excited for the future with AI, because like you say, it does take a lot off of our plates, but also nervous about kind of long-term effects on kind of humanity, so to speak.
Well, there was that thing around Moore's law, the idea that computing power, doubles at a certain period, and it keeps doubling and doubling, and then you get that ever increasing curve. And I'm going to get my years wrong here, but there was I think 2 or 3 years ago, computing power was at the level of a mouse's brain, which, by the way, is actually quite powerful. But then the human brain was sort of now, and then every human brain on this planet is only a few years away. So just because the curve is getting steeper and steeper and steeper. So I guess that exponential increase in computing power, and therefore the potency of tools like AI, should give us pause to consider how we're going to regulate it. But then, we've seen with ChatGPT lots of governments saying we need to regulate it.
Yeah.
But the kind of idea is we need to have a meeting.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure.
Get the whole world.
I just
on
get
the call.
the feeling that ChatGPT is morphing faster than our ability to have enough meetings to control it.
Yeah. The more I speak to people these days, it is becoming a part of their day to day, whether it's at work, whether it's, a side hustle, whatever it is, it just is making people's lives easier, and it just cuts the time, which is the biggest thing that people want, less time and more.
What are we going to do with all this spare time?
Yeah.
What are we going to do with it then? Pick up golf. At that point,
maybe. Yeah. Well, Jonathan, time has ticked today, and it's just been, honestly, it's been wonderful to have you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks a lot. Really nice to speak with you.
Yeah, I think the viewers definitely will agree. There's just so much knowledge that you've been able to share with us on this podcast.
It's not knowledge, it's views, right?
So views.
Again, it needs the kind of caveat that these are just some thoughts on my journey, but I'm not suggesting for one moment that they're right. You need to take your own views.
Yeah.
And take your own stories.
Absolutely. Believing in yourself and just your experiences and how you can kind of shape your career. I think it's quite a powerful but empowering thing. So yeah, really appreciate you coming over and taking the time to teach us all these great things. And until next time, guys, see you soon. And we're done.
Great. Cool.
That was so good.